Barkley took a moment, angered by the way the hunters had been treating him in their conversation, but turned to see Serena's concerned but gentle smile. He breathed out slowly. "Do you want to go out for a coffee while you're here?" They sat down in a small booth at an equally small diner out of sight of the Pokerplex. There was some small conversation, a brief explanation of what had happened the previous 3 nights, but they sat there, drinking scalding hot black coffee and laughing about all the missions they had been on in the past, and how close they had grown over the years. When a thought crossed Barkley's mind, thinking back to how helpful the Hammerhead animatronic had been in getting him out of that room. "Serena, do you remember the program we began planning and starting to work on at the village? If I'm remembering correctly, they were called the Omniforce?" Serena lifted her head and sat up straight, in anticipation and concern for what he was about to begin talking about. The Omniforce is a collective name for a group of animatronics that were found in the possession of one Benjamin Tennyson, built by his grandfather Max Tennyson for the purpose of being used at their travelling fairground, Tennyson's Travelling Space Park. Each of these animatronics were built to be used as decorations for many of the space and alien-themed rides that the fair had to offer, but they didn't actually know what they had in their possession. Before they turned to becoming a travelling fairground, the Tennysons owned a plot of land where they had built a factory for the animatronics, and they had planned on selling them off to other entertainment companies rather than using them themselves. What we suspect happened was that somebody was messing around in a place where they shouldn't have been. One of their security guards, a man by the name of Rook Blanco, heard screams from within the smeltery, followed by the sound of boiling and the hiss of molten metal cooling in the cold night air. When he went to investigate, there was nothing there, and whatever had been there had clearly melted into the molten metal. What the security guard also reported was that one of the endoskeletons was appearing in numerous places for the rest of his shift, and after it had nearly killed him, he had thrown it into the smelting pots, where it too melted into that molten metal. There had been no such activity for a prolonged period of time, but business wasn't doing well either. After news came out about the remains of a body being found in the factory and the security guard's report being repeated in every newspaper and played by every news broadcaster in the county, they had to shut down, but did take all of the materials with them, including the metal the possessed animatronic had been melted into. The Tennyson Travelling Space Park was built on the funds from selling the factory and its land, and they actually started making good money and bringing joy to many of their patrons, until more news reports started coming in, which is when the agency had no choice but to get involved. Following the fair was a plethora of news reports, videos, blogs, and artistic recreations of the animatronics of the park roaming free, walking through streets in broad daylight, and even attacking civilians. We intercepted the fair in the small town of Bellwood, Oregon, USA, and began our search of the site. What we found was unlike any activity we have seen before from spectrals or possession in animatronics. Rather than being connected to a specific animatronic, the spectral had been attached through the power source that the fair had been using, and the spectral had become connected to the whole system, all of its animatronics, rides, and vehicles, but still had to return to the source, a small circular dial that glowed green and was attached to the primary power box. This is why the animatronics never strayed too far, because it was always one spectral that had its body split across multiple entities, and the power generated only lasted as long as a charge. When we figured this out, we seized all animatronics, along with the dial, and moved them to a secure location, before the animatronic village even existed. We could see that this spectral was just scared, so we gave it an offer. A lot of the animatronics at the fair had been built with specific traits that would help in different scenarios. One had 4 arms and was built like a tank, another was small and had the potential to be perfect in safely disarming technology. But they all had some feature that would help on a mission. When we realised this, we gave the spectral the offer to help us, and in return we would work on a better form, and place it in containment with other spectrals. We found that by attaching the dial directly onto one of these animatronics, they would have complete control, and didn't have the same drawback of needing to return for more charge. And the Omniforce was established as an idea pending the agency's approval. The first of these animatronics was a four-armed, four-eyed, blue primate-looking animatronic. It had a slender frame, larger hands, and when needed, the dial is placed on its chest. The vessel has proven itself useful as an all-rounder. Its four arms make it useful for moving debris from fallen buildings, as well as providing extra strength and aid when civilians are involved. The machine is also an exceptional climbing vessel and is especially useful in times where we need to retrieve operatives or civilians from cliff edges or mountainous areas. We are aiming to adapt this animatronic further to aid our missions, but for now this vessel has become one of the more useful entities. We have codenamed this body as the Spinner Kong, as we have now realised the intention was for this design to be a mix of a spider and a monkey, but did not want to name it after an existing animal. The second of these animatronics could be seen as a lot more dense, and is most likely better suited to destroy buildings and acting as a fighter rather than a rescuer. When this animatronic was located at the fair, it was essentially the mascot for a ride labelled Cannon Pinbolt. This was a ride that didn't remotely seem safe for a fairground, but still passed inspection, I suspect down to bribery of some kind. It would be located at the front of the ride and would greet people into the queue line with a dopey, almost monotone voice, and would intermittently curl itself up into a ball using curved yellow metal plates to turn into a perfectly round sphere, and would then follow the track around the ride and return to repeat the exact same series of motions. The concerning thing is, the Spectral knows what this vessel is capable of, and was one of the favourites when they would go walkabouts in the surrounding towns and villages. When the Spectral was still confused and scared, it would use the animatronic in a similar way to a cannonball, rolling it up inside the plates and proceeding to bowl into whatever it wanted. Granted, the Spectral was only doing this because it was a favourite of the patrons visiting the park and they wanted photos with it, but in a similar way to a paparazzi, the patrons would get a bit too close for comfort and the Spectral perceived it as an attack. Anyone who was in the way when this animatronic rolled away was severely injured and, more times than not, concussed. It is essentially because of how well known this animatronic is that we can't be too careful with keeping it out of sight, at least for the foreseeable. It would most likely cause the Spectral to panic again, which would lose any progress we have made with it, and potentially cause it to lose faith in us. The Spectral does still prefer it if we place the dial on this vessel, as it appears to still be its favourite, but we can't take this one out into the field. It will draw too much attention to itself and to our operatives. I don't need to emphasise why it would be a bad thing if we are seen by the general population. The vessel is a large bipedal, semi-humanoid entity with a rotund and muscular build. It doesn't have a head, but similar to other animatronics, the face is built into the body, meaning its body is its head. Its arms are large, thick, and have sections of black and yellow plating similar to shielding. Its legs are slightly smaller and more stubby, making this animatronic very top-heavy. Its hands are large, almost as wide and as thick as its forearms, each with 3 fingers and an opposable thumb. We suspect this model would have been heavily influenced by the appearance of a pillbug or an armadillo, as when it is curled up into its ball form, it does take on an eerily similar appearance. If this vessel was deemed safe to use in the field again, we would use it primarily for demolition and transportation. The shield-like plating that the vessel has makes it a strong and sturdy machine. It can lift a metric ton due to its hefty figure and can easily smash through debris in the event that it needs to reach operatives or civilians for extraction. The demolition would come in handy if there are larger threats, as we could quite literally drop a building on top of them. As well as the added benefit that we can't actively hire contractors to build our facilities, so having a demolitions expert, or a literal wrecking ball, would come in handy. The transportation side comes in from the surprising secondary feature of this animatronic. We have found that whilst hefty in its shape and structure, the space in the animatronic's body is completely hollow, only used when not in ball form to conceal the plates that form the sphere around the entity. We have experimented with this and have found that we can actually transport operatives safely. After having adapted the animatronic further with a gyroscopic sphere inside the mouth, This keeps the injured party safe from harm, even as the animatronic bounds and bounces from the walls and ceilings at 80 miles per hour. This animatronic vessel, whilst not currently in use, does have a significant number of uses that could aid our agency in numerous missions, especially rescue and retrieval operations. For the time being, we have labelled this vessel Cannon for obvious reasons, and we hope that we can reach a point where this vessel does not get mass attention. We might even begin taking it out on missions outside of view of the general public to test its suitability. The Omniforce animatronics are, quite simply, a series of animatronics that can aid the agency towards helping more people, and while I know many of the operatives do not see it this way, I believe Spectrals are just misunderstood, and we can begin to see the true extent of their usefulness in the organisation. There will be more talks about these entities at a later date. If there are any animatronics you would like requested, please leave them in the suggestion box below. Serena smiled. You've been practicing that one for a while, haven't you?